Evan Cross had never planned to stop at the trade station on the edge of the Zalera belt. His cargo ship had taken damage after a rough asteroid run, and one of his engines was overheating. The place was small, crowded, and smelled of strange spices and machine oil, but it was the only port within 3 light days. He walked through the noisy marketplace, trying to ignore the shouts of vendors and the clicking alien tongues that called out to passing travelers. While scanning the stalls for food, his eyes caught something unusual. A small figure struggled to carry a crate almost bigger than herself. She couldn't have been taller than 4 feet. Her head barely reaching Evan's chest. Her skin was pale silver with a faint shimmer under the market lights, and her hair was a deep shade of violet, falling in soft waves down her back. Her eyes, large and bright, seemed almost too big for her small face, glowing faintly like starlight in a deep pool. She staggered under the crate's weight, and Evan instinctively stepped forward. "Careful there," he said, grabbing the box before it could slip from her grasp. The girl froze, startled, and looked up at him with wide eyes for a moment. The noise of the market seemed to fade, replaced by a strange stillness between them. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper. "Thank you." Human. Before Evan could reply, a harsh voice cut through the air. 3 tall alien guards in dark armor pushed through the crowd. Their eyes locked on the girl, and one barked, "You. Back to the docks, now." The girl's small shoulders tensed, and she stepped away from Evan. Clutching the crate again as if afraid to cause trouble, Evan frowned, his gut telling him something wasn't right. But the guards glared at him, making it clear this wasn't his business. She turned to go, her eyes dropping to the ground. Evan wanted to ask her name, to understand why the guards treated her like this, but in seconds she was gone, swallowed by the sea of bodies in the marketplace. He stood there for a moment, staring after her, wondering why such a brief meeting felt so heavy that evening. Evan sat in his ship's small cabin, checking the repairs on his console. He kept thinking about the girl. There was something in her eyes, not just fear, but a kind of quiet strength. He told himself to forget it. He was just a passing pilot. Whatever her life was, it wasn't his fight. Then he heard it. A faint tapping sound against the outside hatch. At first, he thought it was just some loose wiring or a stray piece of equipment in the dock. But then came another sound. A small, trembling voice. "Please, help me." Evan's hand moved to the door control, and the hatch slid open. There she was, standing in the dim light of the docking bay. She was breathing fast, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting someone to appear. Her small hands were clasped together, her eyes wide and desperate. Without thinking, Evan stepped aside and gestured for her to come in. She hesitated for a moment, then darted inside the ship. Once the hatch closed, Evan turned to her. "You're that girl from the market," he said quietly. She nodded, her voice shaking. "My name is Lyra." Evan noticed she kept close to the wall, as if trying to stay out of sight. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to him. "They'll come for me soon," she whispered. "Who?" Evan asked. "The station guards, the overseer's men." Evan crossed his arms. "Why are they after you?" She didn't answer right away, her gaze dropping to the floor. Instead, she asked, "Will you send me away?" The question caught him off guard. "No," he said slowly. "But you need to tell me what's going on." Lyra took a shaky breath. "I'm not allowed to leave the dock area without permission," she said. They use me for work no one else wants to do." Her voice was so quiet that Evan had to lean forward to hear. "Because I'm small, I can crawl into places others can't." She continued, "It's dangerous, but they don't care." Evan felt a twist in his chest. He'd seen plenty of unfair treatment in his travels, but something about this girl made it harder to turn away. Maybe it was the way she spoke without self-pity, or the way she stood straight, even though she was clearly afraid. Before he could ask more, the ship's internal sensors beeped. Motion detected outside, heavy footsteps approaching. Lyra's face went pale. "They've found me," she whispered. Her small hands gripped the edge of his jacket, her eyes searching his for an answer. Evan didn't know why, but in that moment he made a decision. Whatever danger she was in, he wasn't going to hand her over. Evan moved quickly, guiding Lyra toward the back of the ship. The heavy footsteps outside grew louder, echoing in the narrow docking bay. He opened a storage panel and motioned for her to hide. She hesitated, fear flickering in her bright eyes. "They'll search here," she whispered. "Then we make sure they find nothing," Evan replied. His voice low but firm. The hatch alarm chimed, and the door slid open before Evan could reach it. 3 armored alien guards stepped inside, their eyes sweeping the cabin. One of them held a small scanning device, its screen flickering with strange symbols. "We're looking for a runaway worker," the tallest one said, his voice deep and cold. Evan leaned casually against the wall, forcing his face into a mask of boredom. "Haven't seen anyone," he said. "Just me, fixing my ship." The guard narrowed his eyes but didn't speak. Instead, he motioned to the others to check the rooms. Evan's heart beat hard in his chest. He listened as boots clanged against the metal floor, each step sounding far too close to the storage panel where Lyra hid. After what felt like hours, the guards returned to the main cabin. "Clear," one of them muttered. The tallest guard gave Evan a long look, then turned to leave. "If you see her, you'll report it," he said, though it sounded more like a threat than a request. Evan nodded without replying. When the hatch finally closed, Evan exhaled and opened the storage panel. Lyra slipped out, her breathing fast. "You lied for me," she said softly, as if she couldn't believe it. "Looked like you needed it," he replied. For the first time since they met, a small smile touched her lips, though it faded quickly. Evan brought her to the small kitchen area, poured her a cup of warm broth, and sat across from her. "You need to tell me the truth," he said. "Why are they chasing you like this?" Lyra wrapped her hands around the cup, staring down at the steam. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began, "My father. He spoke against the overseer," she said. "He wanted the workers to have fair food and safety, but the overseer said it was rebellion." Her eyes darkened. "They executed him?" Evan's chest tightened. "And you?" he asked. "They said I was property now," she continued, her voice trembling. "I was given to the dockmaster to use however he wanted, and he wanted someone small enough to do the dangerous jobs." Evan leaned back, his mind racing. "So you're not just a worker," he said slowly. "You're the daughter of a political rebel." Lyra's gaze flicked up to meet his. "I never wanted trouble," she said. "I just wanted to live quietly. But every day, they make it worse, outside the ship." A sudden clang echoed through the dock, the sound of heavy containers being moved. Lyra flinched at the noise. "They'll search again," she said. "I can't stay here long." Evan studied her for a moment. Her small frame looked fragile, but there was something unshakable in her eyes. "Then we get you off this station," he said, her eyes widened. "That's impossible." "Nothing's impossible," Evan replied. "It's just illegal." She shook her head. "You don't understand. The overseer's law says no one can take a marked worker off the SC station. Anyone who tries will be hunted." Evan gave a half smile. "Guess I've been hunted before." For a moment, the weight in the air lightened. Lyra's lips curved into the faintest smile, but it faded as quickly as it came, replaced by a look of uncertainty. "Why would you help me?" she asked. Evan hesitated, searching for an answer. The truth was, he didn't know. Not exactly. All he knew was that walking away from her felt wrong in a way he couldn't ignore. "We'll figure out the details later," he said. "Right now, you need rest." Lyra nodded reluctantly. He led her to a small crew bunk. one meant for passengers. She sat on the edge, her violet hair falling forward as she looked at the floor. "I've never been in a room alone before," she murmured. Evan didn't know what to say to that, so he simply nodded and stepped out, closing the door behind him. That night, Evan stayed awake in the cockpit, watching the station's patrol patterns through the external cameras. Every so often, he thought he heard movement from the bunk room. Once, he glanced over and saw Lyra standing quietly in the doorway, watching him. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Every time I close my eyes, I hear them coming for me," she said. Evan looked at her. Then at the empty co-pilot seat. "Sit," he said. She climbed up into the seat, her small frame almost disappearing. In it, the hum of the ship filled the silence. Lyra's eyes wandered over the controls, the blinking lights reflecting in her silver skin. "I've never seen the stars like this," she said softly. "They're endless." Evan glanced at her and saw something different in her face. Not fear this time, but wonder. He realized then that whatever danger this brought, he was already committed. She wasn't just a frightened girl on a station anymore. She was someone he wanted to protect, no matter what it cost. The next morning, Evan woke to the faint sound of tools clinking in the cargo bay. When he went to check, he found Lyra crouched beside a supply crate, her small hands busy tightening bolts with a spanner almost too big for her grip. She looked up, startled, and gave a sheepish smile. "I wanted to help," she said. Evan crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. "You're supposed to be resting," he replied. "I rest too much when I'm hiding," she said quietly. Returning to her work, he watched her for a moment, realizing she was trying to repay him in the only way she knew, by working. But this wasn't about earning her place on the ship. This was about survival, and they couldn't stay here much longer. When she finished, Evan handed her a piece of dried fruit from his ration pack. "We need to talk about getting you out of here," he said. Lyra froze. "Mid-bite, you mean? Leaving the station?" she asked. "That's the idea," Evan replied. "We can't keep dodging guards forever." Her gaze dropped to the floor. "They scan every ship before departure," she said. "They check for stowaways. They check IDs. There's no way I'd pass." Evan gave her a crooked grin. "Good thing I'm not planning on you walking through the front door." He led her to the far end of the cargo bay, pulling a tarp off an empty crate. "This has a hidden compartment," he explained, tapping the panel. "It's got air filters and enough space for you to hide during the scan." Lyra's eyes widened. "You've done this before," she said. Evan didn't answer. He just looked at her and said, "It'll work." They spent the next hour preparing. Evan adjusted the crate's locks so it could open easily from the inside if something went wrong. Lyra helped line it with soft cloth from an old blanket. She worked without complaint. But he could see the tension in her hands. Finally, she looked up and asked, "If they catch us, what will happen to you?" Evan shrugged. "Probably prison," he said. "Or worse." Her eyes filled with guilt. "Then you shouldn't do this," she whispered. Evan shook his head. Too late to back out now. That night, the station was quieter. Cargo crews moved slowly under the dim blue lights, stacking crates and preparing for the next day's shipments. Evan and Lyra kept to the shadows as they moved between stacks of containers. Every time a guard passed, Lyra's small body tensed. Beside him, finally, they reached his ship. Evan loaded the crate into the cargo bay and gestured for her to climb inside. Lyra hesitated, looking at him. "You're sure about this?" she asked. "Positive," he said. She nodded, stepped in, and pulled the panel closed. Evan secured the crate just as the inspection team arrived. 2 alien officers stepped aboard, their scanners sweeping across the room. One of them paused near the crate, frowning at the readings. "This one's heavy," he said, tapping the side. "Machinery parts," Evan replied quickly. "Fragile, don't bang it around." The officer gave him a suspicious look, but moved on. After several tense minutes, they finally left. Evan's shoulders relaxed. For the first time that night, the moment the hatch closed, he opened the crate. Lyra climbed out, her cheeks flushed from the stale air. "You did it," she said, almost smiling. Evan shook his head. "Not yet. We still have to get past the patrol ships." He moved to the cockpit and started the launch sequence. The ship's engines hummed. Lifting them gently from the docking bay, Lyra strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat, her small hands gripping the armrests as the station grew smaller on the screen. She let out a shaky breath, but Evan kept his eyes on the radar. The patrol ships were moving into position. "Hold on," he muttered. Lyra glanced at him. "Why?" "What's happening?" "They're going to scan us one more time," he said. The patrol ship pulled alongside, its bright searchlights flooding the cockpit. A voice crackled over the comms. "Freighter K-17, prepare for inspection." Evan kept his tone calm. "Copy that," he replied, sending over the forged cargo report he'd prepared. Seconds stretched like hours as they waited. Finally, the patrol ship veered away, its lights cutting off. "You're clear," the voice said. Lyra sagged against the seat, her relief clear. "You weren't lying," she said softly. "You really can do the impossible." Evan gave a small smile. Not impossible, just dangerous. They broke away from the station, stars stretching into lines as the ship jumped into hyperspace. Lyra stared out the viewport, her silver skin glowing faintly in the starlight. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked truly free. Evan knew it wasn't over. The overseer wouldn't give up easily, but as he watched her, he realized something. He hadn't just smuggled her out of danger, he'd crossed a line, one he had no intention of stepping back over. The hum of the ship filled the cabin as the streaking stars of hyperspace stretched endlessly ahead. Evan sat in the pilot's seat, adjusting course toward an unmarked trade route far from the overseer's patrol paths. Lyra sat beside him in the co-pilot's chair, her legs barely reaching the edge of the seat. Swinging slowly as she stared at the glowing star map, she was quiet. But it wasn't the tense silence from before. It was the kind of silence that came when someone was trying to take in a whole new world. After a while, she spoke, her voice soft. "Is it always like this, flying between the stars?" Evan smiled faintly. "Most of the time, yes," he said, "but sometimes the stars aren't this peaceful." She tilted her head. "You mean pirates?" "Pirates, raiders, patrols that don't like strangers," he said. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't seem afraid, more curious. "Then why do it?" she asked. Evan glanced at her. "Because it's freedom." That word seemed to linger in the air between them. Lyra looked away, her hands curling in her lap. "I've never had that," she said quietly. Evan didn't press her for more. He knew enough already. Instead, he set the autopilot and stood up. "Come on," he said. "I'll show you something." He led her to the simulator room, a small space used for training new pilots. The controls were simplified, but the view screens created a perfect imitation of flying through open space. He guided her into the pilot's seat, her small frame almost swallowed by the chair. Her eyes widened as the simulated stars blinked into view. "Go ahead," Evan said. "Take the controls." She hesitated, looking unsure. "I might crash it," she murmured. "It's a simulator. Crash all you want," he replied with a smirk, slowly. She wrapped her hands around the controls. At first, her movements were shaky, the simulated ship drifting too far to the side, but then she corrected herself, adjusting the speed. Her expression shifted from worry to focus. "Like this?" she asked. "Exactly like that," Evan said, watching her closely. Minutes passed as she guided the simulation through asteroid fields and narrow space channels. Each time she avoided a collision. Her confidence grew when she finally docked. The simulated ship at a station without a scratch, She grinned, a real bright smile that transformed her whole face. Evan found himself smiling too. "You're a natural," he said. She shook her head, still grinning. "Maybe. But I think it's because you're teaching me." Later, they shared a meal in the small galley. It wasn't much, just reheated ration stew, but Lyra ate with quiet contentment. Between bites, she asked endless questions about human life. What's Earth like? Is it true you have oceans bigger than whole moons? Do humans really live in cities with buildings taller than ships? Evan answered as best as he could, sometimes laughing at her amazement when he described the smell of rain on fresh grass. Her eyes went soft. "I want to smell that someday," she said, almost like a promise to herself. But the warmth of their conversation was shadowed by the unspoken truth. They were still being hunted. Evan kept checking the ship's sensors, making sure no patrols were following. Every time a blip appeared on the radar, his muscles tensed. Until it faded, Lyra noticed, "Of course, they won't stop, will they?" She asked one evening, "Not until they think you're gone for good." Evan replied. Her gaze didn't waver. "Then we can't let them find us," she said simply, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Lyra helped with small repairs, passing him tools or crawling into spaces too tight for him to reach. She learned how to monitor fuel levels, how to track navigation points, even how to adjust the ship's environmental controls. The more they worked together, the more Evan noticed small details. The way she hummed softly when concentrating. The way her eyes lit up when she learned something new. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was growing. One evening, as they sat in the cockpit, a strange silence settled between them. Not awkward, just aware. Lyra was looking out at the stars, her profile outlined in the dim glow of the controls. Evan realized he didn't see her the way he had at the beginning, as someone he needed to protect out of duty. Now, it was more than that, though. He didn't have the words for it yet. Without looking at him, she spoke. "Do you think it's possible for someone like me to really belong somewhere?" Evan thought about it. "Yes," he said finally. "And maybe that place isn't where you're born, but where someone wants you to be." Her eyes flicked to his, and for a moment, neither of them looked away. The hum of the ship filled the pause. Then, slowly, she smiled. Not the shy, uncertain smiles from before, but one that felt steady, and Evan, for reasons he didn't fully understand, felt his chest tighten somewhere. Deep down, he knew it. This small alien girl had already stolen more than his attention. She had stolen his heart. The warning siren blared through the ship. Evan was in the cockpit in seconds. Scanning the radar, 3 red blips had appeared on the outer range. Moving fast, Lyra rushed in, gripping the doorframe, her eyes wide. "What is it?" she asked. "Patrol ships," Evan said, his voice sharp but calm. "They found us." He adjusted the controls, angling the ship toward the nearest asteroid field. The blips were closing in, their speed outmatching his freighter's engines. Lyra strapped herself into the co-pilot seat, her hands clutching the armrests. "Can we outrun them?" she asked. "Not in a straight line," Evan replied, "but if we make it into the rocks, we have a chance." The asteroid field loomed ahead, a swirling mass of spinning stone and ice. The patrol ships kept coming, their engines glowing like small suns against the black. Evan pushed the thrusters to full power, the freighter shuddering as it accelerated. The first asteroids flashed past, close enough to scrape the hull. "Keep your eyes on the radar," Evan told Lyra. "Call out anything too close." She nodded quickly, scanning the screen. "Left, 200 meters," she said. Evan swerved, the ship barely missing a spinning rock the size of a house. "Right, 90 meters." She called again. They weaved through the deadly maze, the patrol ships following but struggling to match their turns. A flash of light burst across the viewport. They're firing. Lyra gasped. Evan twisted the ship sharply, the energy blast missing by meters. The shockwave rattled the hull, but they kept moving. We have to lose them in the debris, Evan said. Look for a path that's too small for them to follow. Lyra's eyes darted across the radar. There. Narrow gap ahead, 40 meters wide. Evan gritted his teeth. That's tight, he said. You said you've been hunted before. She reminded him, a small, fierce smile flickering across her face. Evan smirked despite the danger. Hold on. He angled the freighter toward. The gap engines roaring. The ship scraped against the edge, sending sparks across the viewport, but they made it through. The patrol ships tried to follow. One clipped the side and spun out. The other veered away, searching for another path. They're breaking formation, Lyra said. Good, Evan replied. That means they'll be slower for several tense minutes. They navigated deeper into the field. Finally, the radar cleared. No pursuit signals. Evan eased the engines down, the ship's hum settling into a steady rhythm. Lyra let out a long breath she'd been holding. We did it, she said, her voice half disbelieving. Evan nodded. For now, they drifted in the shadow of a massive asteroid. Hiding from long-range scans, Lyra leaned back in her seat, her hands trembling slightly. Evan glanced at her. You handled that well, he said. She shook her head. I was just following your orders. That's what makes a good co-pilot, he replied. Her gaze softened. Evan, if you had left me back on the station, you wouldn't be in danger now. He met her eyes. And if I had left you, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. For a moment, the only sound was the quiet hum of the ship. They spent the next hour running system checks. The chase had strained the engines, and one of the stabilizers was close to overheating. We'll need to land somewhere to fix this, Evan said, but it has to be off any official maps. Lyra leaned forward, pointing at the star chart. There's a place. The drift. Markets, she said. It's not on patrol routes, but traders go there all the time. No one asks questions. Evan raised an eyebrow. You've been there? Once, she said, with the dockmaster, but I remember the route. Evan studied the coordinates, then set the course. If it's as hidden as you say, it might work. The ship slipped out of the asteroid field, the stars opening. Up before them again, Lyra stayed in the co-pilot seat, her gaze on the endless black every so often. She would glance at Evan, as if making sure he was still there. He noticed, but didn't say anything. She had been hunted for so long, maybe she still needed proof she wasn't alone anymore. Hours later, as they approached the sector leading to the drift markets, Evan caught her staring at him again. What? He asked with a small grin. She looked away quickly. Nothing. Just thinking, she murmured. About what? Her voice was quiet, almost hesitant about how strange it feels. To trust someone. Evan's smile faded into something softer. Get used to it, he said, because I'm not letting go. Lyra's lips curved into a small, shy smile, and for the first time since the chase began, she looked completely at ease. The drift markets were unlike any place Evan had seen. They floated on the edge of a quiet moon, hidden inside a vast debris field of broken ships and shattered satellites. Only those who knew the secret routes could enter safely from the outside. It looked like chaos. Hundreds of mismatched vessels docked together, forming a sprawling, lawless city in space. Evan guided the freighter through the narrow approach tunnel. Lyra sat forward in the co-pilot's seat, her eyes darting over the view. This is it, she whispered. No patrols come here. He didn't relax, not yet. A place without law meant no one asked questions. But it also meant no one offered protection. They found a docking slot between two rusted cargo haulers. As the engines cooled, Evan glanced at Lyra. Keep your hood up out there, he said. She nodded. Pulling a deep brown cloak around her small frame, it hid most of her silver skin and violet hair. Though her bright eyes still caught the light, the markets were a maze of narrow walkways and stacked platforms. Vendors sold everything from stolen starship parts to exotic food. The air was thick with the smell of burning fuel and fried spice bread. Lyra kept close to Evan, her small hand gripping the side of his jacket as they moved through the crowd. They stopped at a repair stall run by a three-eyed mechanic named Bran. Evan explained the damage to his stabilizer. Bran grunted. "Easy fix, but parts cost double if you want it today." Evan paid without arguing. The sooner they could leave, the better. While Bran worked, Evan took Lyra to a small food stand. She stared at the menu board, her eyes wide at the choices. "Pick anything," Evan said. She hesitated, then pointed at a small plate of fried starfruit slices. When she bit into one, her eyes lit up. "It's sweet," she said in amazement. "I've never tasted sweet before." Evan's chest tightened at the thought. How many simple things had she been denied her whole life? For 2 days, they stayed in the drift markets. Lyra began to relax, walking with a little more confidence. She laughed once, a soft, unexpected sound, when Evan almost tripped over a sleeping alien merchant's tail. At night, they stayed in the freighter, eating meals in the quiet glow of the cockpit. She asked him about Earth again, about oceans and forests. Evan found himself talking more than he usually did. Something about her made the words come easily on the third night. They were preparing to leave when the warning sensors lit up. Evan's heart sank as he checked the readings. A patrol ship, not just any, but one marked with the overseers. Crest had entered the debris field. "They found us," he said. Lyra's face went pale. "But how?" "They must have tracked us from the asteroid field," Evan said grimly. "They're scanning every docked ship." Bran's repair stall was already closed. Evan grabbed his gear and motioned for Lyra to follow. "We can't launch. They'll see us on the scanners," he said. "Then what do we do?" she asked. "We hide." They slipped out through the back corridors of the market, weaving through dimly lit maintenance tunnels. Evan knew patrol soldiers would be searching the obvious exits. Instead, he led her deeper into the warren of abandoned ship parts. Lyra kept pace despite her small size, her eyes scanning every shadow. They found shelter in the gutted hull of an old freighter. It smelled of rust and stale air, but it was hidden from the main patrol paths. They crouched in the dark, listening to the distant thud of boots and the hum of scanners. Lyra's breathing was fast. Evan put a hand on her shoulder. "They won't find us here," he said quietly. She nodded, though he could tell she wasn't convinced. Hours passed slowly. The patrols swept through the area twice, their voices muffled through the walls. At one point, a beam of light flashed through a crack, stopping inches from Lyra's face. She froze, holding her breath until it moved away. When the sound of boots finally faded for good, she let out a long, shaky sigh. Back in the freighter, Evan secured the hatch and ran a quick systems check. "They'll keep searching for you," he said. Lyra looked at him, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Then we keep running." Evan studied her for a moment, realizing how far she'd come since the day they met. She wasn't just surviving now. She was choosing to fight for her freedom later that night. As the ship drifted quietly away from the drift markets, Lyra stood beside Evan in the cockpit. The stars stretched before them, endless and silent. She looked up at him and said softly, "You've risked everything for me. Why?" Evan didn't answer right away because the truth was simple and complicated all at once. "Because you matter," he said finally. Her lips curved into a faint smile. And in that moment, Evan knew it didn't matter how far they had to run. He wasn't going to let her go. The stars outside were calm, but Evan's mind wasn't. They had been running for weeks, dodging patrols, hiding in shadowed ports, and avoiding anyone who might sell them out. Lyra sat in the co-pilot's seat, tracing shapes on the armrest. With her small fingers, she didn't say it, but Evan could see the tiredness in her eyes. Even freedom could be exhausting when you were always looking over your shoulder. The ship's comm system crackled to life. A coded transmission came through. Evan opened it, half expecting another warning from a friendly trader. Instead, a cold, official voice spoke. "Evan Cross, we know you have the marked worker Lyra aboard. Return her to the nearest station, and all charges against you will be dropped." Lyra froze, her eyes locking onto his. The voice continued. "Failure to comply will result in a galaxy-wide bounty on your head." Then the message cut off, leaving the cockpit silent. Evan leaned back in his seat, staring at the dark expanse beyond the glass. This was the choice. Turn her in and walk. Free or keep running forever. He glanced at Lyra. She didn't speak, but her small hands gripped the seat so tightly, her knuckles turned pale silver. "Don't say it," Evan said quietly. She frowned. "Say what?" "That you think I should let you go," he replied. Her gaze dropped to the floor. "You've lost enough because of me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Evan shook his head. "I haven't lost anything worth keeping, Lyra." He stood and walked toward the back of the ship. She followed, her cloak swaying around her legs. In the cargo bay, he opened a hidden compartment in the wall. Inside was a navigation chip. Small but powerful. He placed it in her hand. "This is the route to a system where the Overseer's laws don't matter," he said. "You could go there without me. You'd be safe." She stared at the chip for a long moment. Then she shook her head and pushed it back into his hand. "Safe isn't the same as home," she said. "And you feel like home." Evan didn't answer right away. Instead, he slid the chip into the console, setting a course for the distant system. If the Overseer wanted to find them, he'd have to cross half the galaxy, and by then, maybe it would be too late. As the ship jumped into hyperspace, Lyra stood beside him. Her small hand rested lightly on his arm. "Evan," she said softly, "why did you care from the start?" Back on the station, "You could have just walked away." He looked down at her. "Because you looked at me like I wasn't just another human passing through," he said. "Like I mattered." For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she smiled. That small, steady smile he'd come to know. "You did," she said, "and you still do." They reached the edge of the system 2 days later. It was a place unlike any other twin suns, lighting up a chain of green worlds. No patrols, no Overseer's crest, no one asking questions. They landed on a small moon covered in soft grass and wildflowers. Lyra stepped out first, her boots sinking into the ground. She turned slowly, her eyes taking in the horizon. This is what freedom feels like," she whispered. Evan walked beside her, the warm light painting her silver skin in gold. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she looked up at him. "You've given me more than I ever thought I could have," she said. "You didn't just save me. You gave me a life." Evan met her gaze. "I didn't save you," he said. "We saved each other." They stayed there until the suns dipped low, the sky glowing with strange colors. When they returned to the ship, Lyra didn't go to her own bunk. Instead, she followed him to the cockpit. Curling up in the co-pilot's seat, she didn't ask for permission. She didn't need to. Evan adjusted the controls, the hum of the engines filling the silence. Her eyes closed and she rested her head against the seat. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing soft and even. Evan looked at her and felt something settle in his chest. It wasn't just about running anymore. It wasn't just about keeping her safe. It was about never letting her feel alone again. Outside, the stars waited, endless and quiet. Inside, a small alien girl who once had nothing was now his world, and Evan knew, without doubt, that he'd chosen right. He'd chosen her.